A war going on, and it's been going on for quite some years now. This is World War III, but it is not a conventional war with conventional armies. It is a war that uses information, finance, assassinations, disinformation, special operations, many things like that. And it really is ultimately about the psychological process of deciding what we as a species do in the future. And I'm going to try to explain to you where we are now and what we can do to make things better. Now, the big story is very simple. Starting around the year 2000, the overall balance of world economic power shifted from the West to Asia. That means that the percentage of world GDP, the percentage of world trade, everything shifted to over 50% for Asia, or more specifically, the BRICS nations, which includes South America, India, Africa, everything but the West, okay? And the other problem, or the other thing that occurred, is that the Western nations as a whole have been running a deficit for more than 40 years. That is to say, they have been taking stuff from the rest of the world and not paying for it. They were able to get away with this because of their military power. However, that also shifted because at a certain point, China reached a point where the United States could no longer crush it militarily. The Pentagon did war games over 9 times in a row with a simulated war against China, and each time they lost. Now, George Bush Sr. and his group of neocons had a plan for this, which was revealed to me by British intelligence. The plan was to start a new Cold War. This new Cold War between Russia and the West was meant to lead to a huge increase in military budgets in the United States, in Europe, and in Japan, and in Russia. The Russians, according to Bush's plan, were supposed to pretend to be the allies of China. However, in the end, what was going to happen, according to this plan, was that the West, Russia, Japan, they all would turn on China. They would invade China, and the plan was to divide China into about 6 countries. This I heard from people who actually were briefed on the plan, including senior Japanese politicians. However, this plan was not a viable one because it would have led to all-out nuclear war, and that would have meant the destruction of the northern hemisphere and the death of about 90% of the world's population. Now, the reason why people like Bill Gates and the other people put up seed vaults in the Antarctic and stuff, or the Arctic, was because they were preparing for such an eventuality. Fortunately, sane minds in the Pentagon and the military realized that destroying the planet was insane, and that plan has been stopped. However, what has not been resolved is that the West does not want to be ruled by Asia. We do not want to become Chinese slaves, so we have to come up with a new deal. Now, in my case, the reason I got involved was because I found out about these plans to start World War III and kill 90% of the world's population, and I realized this had to be stopped. And I also realized that unfortunately the United States had fallen under the control of criminally insane gangsters. These are what we call the neocons, but basically they were Zionist fanatics who thought that they were going to start Armageddon and then rule the world forever. And they were, basically invading countries like Iraq, murdering hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, stealing oil, and acting like vandals, criminals, murderers on the world stage with impunity. They were breaking international law. They were breaking all sorts of normal agreements of civilization to carry out this insane plan. And I realized they had to be stopped. And I also realized that the way to stop them was to cut off their money. That's why I approached the Asian elders, initially the Japanese and the Chinese and the Asians, and told them, you cannot pay them to kill you. It's insane. And that's why I got involved with what's known as the red and the green, which is an ancient worldwide alliance of people who the society can only be used for the greater good. It cannot be used for personal benefit. And we started this war, and one thing that happened was when I was initiated into the red and blue, they asked me to find benevolent Western secret societies or Western groups to help us. And I did so. I found out that there were a lot of groups in the West who were fighting for the greater good. And these include the British Empire, which, for all its flaws, was trying to do good. Okay, they were misguided, they were racist, they made a lot of mistakes, but, you know, their heart was in the right place, and overall they did more good than they did bad. The other place was the Catholic Church. Again, you know, they have a very mixed history, but the fact of the matter is that in the poorest, most horrid places on earth where people are starving, you'll find Jesuit priests feeding people, keeping them alive, where no one else would be there. And overall, despite the pedophilia and, you know, their fascist tendencies, everything else, on the balance of things, they were more good than bad. And they have been cleaning themselves up. The Catholic Church has removed 4,000 pedophile priests. They've had a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. They've paid compensation money for their victims. And they also cleaned up the Vatican Bank and are trying to do good things. Furthermore, what has also happened is that the meeting on February 12th between the Pope and the head of the Russian Orthodox Church was the first such meeting in 962 years, but it was a consolidation of Christianity and Western civilization, saying we're going to draw a line in the sand where we believe that Western civilization is right, is on the right path, and we're doing the right thing, and we're willing to fight if somebody crosses that line. And there has been an alliance formed now between the Pentagon and the Russian military. What people need to understand then is, and this is very confusing because the United States is in the middle of a civil war by proxy. The civil war is taking place in the Ukraine, in the Middle East, and in the American political sphere. But let's make this very clear. The problems in Syria and the Ukraine were not caused by the U.S. military. The U.S. military was not involved in the destruction of Libya. The last destruction of a country that the United States military was responsible for was Iraq. And what happened in Iraq was that the American military, the White Hats, thought that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and he was going to kill hundreds of thousands of people, or he was killing hundreds of thousands of people. So they believed that they were going in there to save lives and do good. Then, when they got there, they found out that actually no, they'd been fooled. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and all they'd done is destroy a country in order to steal oil for people like the Bushes and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. They became very angry, and they said, we're not going to be fooled again. And they haven't been. The United States military has not been involved in any other invasion or illegal international act since that time. They've been trying to do good. So, what is the problem? The problem is this. As those of us who are aware know, is that on September 10th, 2001, one day before the 9/11 neocon terror attacks, Donald Rumsfeld said that $2.3 trillion had gone missing from the U.S. military budget. And according to my senior CIA and other sources, that money was used to create a giant mercenary army known as Blackwater, XC, Craft International, now ISIS. Um, and it was this modern day SS, separate from the US military, that has been responsible for the carnage and terror in Syria, that has been involved in operations to destroy the once rather blissful country of Libya, and also having illegally overthrown the elected government of the Ukraine. Now, these mercenary armies are funded by drug money, illegal drug money. And this illegal drug money network is huge. I once did an estimate that it was about $2 trillion a year, which is roughly 3 times the budget of the U.S. military that comes from illegal drugs. This illegal drug network was set up by the leftover Nazi forces who kept their submarine network intact after the surrender, and Japanese military forces who did not surrender, as well as Chinese Kuomintang military forces who did not surrender to the Chinese communists after 1949. So we had an alliance after World War II, underground, of Nazis shipping cocaine from South America to the world to make money. And then we had the Kuomintang mercenaries shipping heroin from the Golden Triangle. And we had the Japanese militarists shipping amphetamines from North Korea to the world. And these people were building up a huge secret army to start a fascist coup d'etat and to create a world fascist government. This is the forces that were behind 9/11. These are the forces that turned the United States into a fascist country after 9/11. And for those of you who do not realize it, do your homework. You'll find out that the Patriot Act is virtually identical to the Nazi Constitution. Okay? The United States is now a fascist dictatorship. And elections are now rigged electronically. You do not have a democracy there anymore. Now, fortunately, a big fight has been going on to cut the money off of these people to prevent them from taking over the world and killing 90% of the population, as they plan to do. And we have done a lot. We've stopped them, for example, from creating mass starvation by exposing the fact they were using privately owned central bank money to finance farmers to grow fuel instead of food. So they couldn't starve people because we exposed them. Multiple attempts to start World War III have been stopped. They tried to start it between Japan and China. They tried to start it between Israel and Iran. They tried to start it with Syria. And now they tried to start it again in the Ukraine. And then most recently, we had the Turks trying to start it by shooting down a Russian plane and asking for NATO to start war against Russia. All these insane attempts have been stopped. These people are failing. And now we are ready to turn a new page for the planet Earth. We're almost there. There's a few things that have to be done. In the United States, we have a situation where we have Donald Trump running for president. And he is causing the old establishment, the Council on Foreign Relations, the neocons, to freak out. And the military support him because he's a genuine patriot, and he's a self-made man, and he's not part of the cabal, which is all well and good. And certainly Hillary Clinton is the candidate for the Council on Foreign Relations, for the Rockefellers, for the old guard. And that's just not going to happen. She has no real support, and the military have said that they will move in and fight if they try to force her on us. However, Donald Trump needs to understand some realities of the world. He is talking about, for example, raising a 65% tariff on Chinese steel and closing U.S. borders. That's not wise. Argentina, after World War II, was considered the Switzerland of South America. It was one of the richest countries in the world. they started protectionist policies. They cut off imports, and everything became Industria Argentina. The result was that country degenerated to third world status over the period of decades. The United States will do the same thing if they try to close their borders. You'll become a third world country, cut off from the rest of the world, and become losers. So, what does the United States have to do to restore its strength? Well, the first thing, I keep repeating this, but I will repeat it again, is that they need to abandon the US dollar. The United States dollar is not and has not been American since 1913, okay? It is owned by an international cartel of industrialists and royal families. Now, after World War II, the US dollar was closely related to the United States. The United States controlled 50% of the world's GDP, they had all the world's gold, and the interests of the US dollar in the United States were the same. However, the United States ran out of gold in 1972 with the Nixon shock. They then shifted to oil. They said if you want to have oil, you got to buy US dollars, and that kept the thing going for a while. But basically, United States living standards have been falling since 1972. Okay, Americans, except for the 1%, are poorer now than they were in 1972. That's because of this failed economic policy and this insistence on using the US dollar. Here is what we have been proposing. We need to separate the internationally traded dollar from the United States. It is no longer an American thing. The dollars that are owned by the Nigerians, by the Chinese, by the Japanese, by everybody in the world are hard-earned, genuine dollars, and we cannot devalue them. So, what I've said is the United States needs to use their own currency. They need to issue a government-controlled currency separate from the US dollar, which will be controlled by a new international organization. And we'll talk about that later. But for now, we'll talk about what happens if the United States issues their own currency. The first thing that'll happen is all that Chinese stuff in Walmart, and 85% of the stuff in Walmart is made in China, okay? That'll double in price overnight, which will mean that American industry will be competitive again. People will buy American products again because they'll be cheaper and better. The other thing that'll happen is that the United States exports will be competitive. Right now, the United States is running about a $500 billion a year deficit. The rest of the world is subsidizing it. Ships are going into the United States full of stuff, they're leaving empty. 60% of the ships leaving the United States are empty. Okay? The United States has become parasites. However, if you devalue your currency, your new currency, the good part is that, okay, the Chinese stuff in Walmart will become more expensive, but as I said, your exports will start increasing and your real economy will get good. The other thing that will happen is there will be a huge influx of tourists, you know, buying up bargain hotel deals and visiting the Grand Canyon and spending their money. And that'll create lots and lots of jobs for lots and lots of, you know, everyday Americans. The other thing that will happen is that investors will come to the United States and build factories and create jobs. And it'll be a really good thing for the real economy. Finally, if the United States has its own currency, it means that the government can print money. And they can do, for example, inside the United States, they could start a giant infrastructure boom. All your bridges, your roads, hospitals, schools, everything can be rebuilt without taxes, without debt, by using government money. The other thing you can do is finance space exploration, research and development, pay for universities, pay for health care. Your entire country can double standards of living within a year if you do this. And if you don't understand this, go talk to Vladimir Putin of Russia. He doubled Russian standards of living in a single year simply by kicking out the Khazarian gangster bankers from Russia. The United States can do the same thing. Take over the process of creating money and give it back to the government as was said in the Constitution. Now, The other thing that has to be done, and this is the part where we're still working on it, is that if the United States issues their own currency and stops using the US dollar, we have to worry about the international United States military. The United States military is now a world military. They're all over the world, and they're there to protect business interests. Let's face it. And these people have said if they're just left in the lurch and suddenly their paychecks bounce and they've not, and they can't eat, they're going to fight. And just bringing them back to America is not going to be the answer, because we need security for factories, for mines, for nature preserves, all that kind of stuff. So, what has happened is that the White Dragon Society, which is an alliance of benevolent Western secret societies, has offered to continue to finance the international operations of the U.S. military and to promote an integration of the U.S. military with the military of Russia, China, Japan, the whole world, okay, to create a global defense force. This is not a fascist thing. It's not going to rule the world. We're simply going to be at the service of the world's governments to help protect the planet. And the job description will change from stealing resources for corporations owned by oligarchs to protecting the weak, the poor, and nature. In other words, protecting the life force, protecting the planet, and exploring the universe. These are the new job descriptions that we are planning for the U.S. military. Now, the Asian allies of the White Dragon Society have offered virtually unlimited amounts of gold to be sold at 13% below market prices. And of that 13%, 3% will go to commissions. Okay, this is basically grease. Okay, it's money for the people who are doing the actual work. Okay, it's a commission. It's a legitimate commission. It'll go to all the spooks and other people who've been fighting to help make the world better. 10% will go towards creating a new future planning agency. This agency will be completely transparent. Its budget will be on the internet for everybody to see and vote on. It'll hire the most intelligent people on Earth to make plans for the future of the planet. We have some initial ideas already, which we've discussed before. We want to turn the deserts green. We want to increase the amount of fish in the oceans back to their natural level. We want to develop the Arctic areas. We want to create new nature preserves. And most of all, we want to create new ecosystems and increase the amount of life on this planet. Not just human life, but animal life, plant life, all sorts of life. And we want to transform, for example, right now you have DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. That's going to be turned into LARPA, Life Advanced Research Projects Agency. In other words, we're going to come up with the most fantastic stuff for the future, for the good of all. Technologies we can't even imagine today. And of course, we're going to make our first priority to increase all life, including human life. That means we want to increase the population, not decrease it, and we want to increase longevity. We think we can make people immortal. And that doesn't mean that we're going to then cannibalize the limited resources of the planet, because what we'll do is we'll increase the resources, we'll increase the planet, we'll grow out exponentially. These are all things that can be realistically accomplished. And we're very close to making it happen. The final obstacles, as far as I can tell, are the American oligarch families that control the current US dollar paradigm. That's the Rockefellers, the Bushes, the Rothschilds. These people are still standing in the way, but I think they are ready to move out of the way once the proper setup is there. And of course, we need to understand that the world has to be a single planet. We all share the same air, we all use the same oceans, we're all born from the same creation. That means like any village, like any town, like any school, we need a basic set of rules. We don't want to have a world where people can go, invade countries, kill people, and steal their stuff with impunity. We need rules. Murder is not allowed. Theft is not allowed. That applies for the United States as well as everybody else. Okay, no more invading countries, killing people, and stealing resources. That has to stop. It doesn't mean a single fascist centralized world government. It just means that we all have to obey minimum social rules that are found in any society. Even animal societies have basic rules. We don't right now internationally. So we're going to make a big push, and we've identified the last few holdouts. We think all this can be accomplished sooner rather than later, and we wish all your support. The White Dragon Society is meant to be a temporary vessel to get us started. It's going to be done completely transparently. Everybody will be able to see exactly what happens, how it happens, and why it happens, and they'll be allowed to vote. And the system we want for this new future planning agency is meritocracy. That means rule by the best. It's like a singing contest where anybody can apply to join, everybody can vote, and everybody agree on who's best and why they got to the top. And everybody can see why they're there, and if they don't like it, they can climb up there and take them down. The other thing we'll make sure is that there will be complete freedom of the press. Humanity should always have access to the truth, because without the truth, you end up with lies, you end up with corruption, you end up with decay. It's better to know your little toe is on fire than to wait until your foot's on fire and you're dead. Okay? We need freedom of the press, and that's going to be a guaranteed. It'll be real-time, live democracy plus meritocracy, and it'll be open to all the people of the planet Earth, not just the secret elite. These are